I'm ready.
Are you ready?
I'm ready.
No.
I'm ready.
But I'm asking, are you ready?
No, I'm not ready.
Are you ready?
Are you ready to rumble?
Ready, set, go. Oh. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Queer Collective Podcast. My hat fell off a little bit. My name is Karbon.
And I'm Emily.
And welcome to the show. Today, we are going to be talking about how tying purpose to your work can help you stay motivated and passionate about what you're doing.
So one thing that I have noticed is that a lot of people that we're talking to, anytime we meet someone new, they tell us that they've recently quit their job to pursue their own business or to pursue art.
Which I love to see.
I love that. And as many of you know, if you listen to our podcast, we've also done a similar thing in like the last year and a half.
Yeah. In the last, I think you're about right. Either year and a half or 2 years-ish, give or take. We did the same thing where we gave up our regular 9-to-5 jobs for artistic ones.
Yeah.
So to hear that it's not just us and that a lot of people have been thinking this way is quite exciting, honestly.
You want to know the tea? I actually have a little
now.
factoid here. So apparently, because of COVID, changed priorities towards personal time, mental health, and flexibility has approximately 40% of people switching jobs in what is being dubbed the Great Resignation.
I love that.
Yeah.
So instead of the Great Recession, it's the Great Resignation.
Yes.
Lovely. I am absolutely in love with that. And, you know, in terms of like me seeing it myself, like the quickest example that I can think of is like randomly when we were driving to Muskoka, I saw McDonald's and the sign of the McDonald's was like, we're paying $1 over minimum wage. Come work here. We need workers, you know, like these minimum wage jobs that typically have a lot of people applying for them no longer have this giant influx of people because
capitalism, we're sick of it. We're
sick of it.
I'm absolutely done with you. Get out of here.
I think that people are, and I love that they're kind of recalculating what they want their life to look like
their
and
values.
To feel like and what they truly value in life, which I'm obsessed with.
Yeah, well, I think taking time to pause, you really realize it's like, oh my God, who have I built this life for? Like, what am I doing this for?
Exactly.
Yeah.
There's this one quote from, I don't know who.
Fair and square.
But if you know, let me know in the comments. But there's this one quote from some dude that I can't remember the name of, but it's
love
great.
That guy.
I love this guy. He said, if you don't spend, I'm going to paraphrase a little bit. If you don't spend time to build your dream, you're going to spend the time building somebody else's. Yeah. And that's paraphrased, of course, because I can't even remember the dude's name, but it's so true. And little lines like that, oftentimes, like you read it and you're like, true, but it doesn't really register.
Yeah.
And I feel like for a lot of people, the pandemic in general has allowed them to really register certain things. I know that I have. There's been so many quotes or lines or lessons and teachings in the past where I've heard something, I'm like, oh yeah, that makes sense. But it didn't I was like, in theory, it makes sense, but I didn't feel it in my heart. You know what I'm saying? And you really got to like feel it and like really it has to resonate in order for you to resign.
Love it. But the reason that we're sort of tying that to finding purpose in your work to help you stay motivated is because quitting your job, like your regular 9-to-5 job, to pursue either your own business or your art, that is working for yourself. Obviously, starting your own businesses, but a lot of people don't recognize that pursuing art as a full-time career is being an entrepreneur. Like, you're working for yourself. You're doing much more than just your art. You're figuring out ways to sell your art and ways to monetize it.
And everything is your art. Like every part of the business. Marketing is your art. And the actual art piece is your art. And promoting yourself and knowing how to talk about yourself in a way that where you're not selling yourself short. That in itself, it's its own art form that I sometimes am not very good at. But we're learning here.
Yeah, but I think a lot of people's fear, which was one of mine when you were going to quit your job.
Yeah.
Was how are we going to stay motivated without having these pressures of like a company asking us for things or deadlines, etc.? Like, how do we make sure we're staying accountable?
Well, you know what the beautifully ironic thing about that worry is?
Tell me.
Is that we were like, there's definitely this worry of how am I going to make money, and panic and anxiety and stress sets in, right? And the thing about it is that because you go all in and you're like, well, I'm going to give it a try and this is my life and hopefully I can catch myself. Because you do that and you take that leap of faith, you are now motivated by those doubts. You're like, I'm going to prove to myself that I can make money. I'm going to prove to myself that I don't have to be a starving artist. I'm going to prove it to myself and to everybody that I can do this, because now I don't have a plan B.
Yeah.
Now I'm all in. And because I'm all in, I have no choice but to make it work.
Yeah. And then on top of that, another reason why this is important, if you aren't believing me yet,
Please believe.
if I haven't convinced you yet, is that once you start taking something that you're passionate about, such as art, which may have been a hobby for you before, and you start monetizing it, another fear can be that you lose that love or lust for your craft and it becomes work and you start to dread it. That is something that I have struggled with a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I actually do also struggle with that a lot. There's many times, and I'm sure this is true for everybody who's an artist who's trying to make an income out of that art. There's times where you don't feel motivated. There's times where you don't feel creative. There's times where you don't feel inspired, or you initially are motivated by the idea, but you work on it so long that it just becomes boring and you're like, I don't want to do this anymore.
I've memorized this entire video and I'm done.
I'm done. I can recite it to you if you want.
Word by word.
Pick a timestamp. I know the quote.
Oh, God.
But what's something that has really, really helped you when it comes to those moments of, I don't want to do this anymore?
Thank you so much for asking.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So that's basically the whole concept of this video for me, is that what I realized was, and this kind of started with editing videos that feel a bit more mundane, is where it really started hitting for me. Was, say I'm editing like an interview, or I'm editing even our podcast, where it's not something that's like super exciting. Like, I love editing music videos, for example, because there's so much creativity in that. But once something becomes repetitive, it's like, it starts to feel like a job, and it starts to feel like you're resenting it a little bit. And one thing that started to help me actually was on the podcast, for example, seeing people's comments or talking to people who listen to the podcast. That really, really helped me think about what the result was, I guess. Like, who is this impacting?
Yes.
Like, is
that's
there
a huge one right there.
Yeah.
Who is this impacting?
And if this message comes across to even just one person, it feels worth it to me. And so when I'm sitting there and I'm editing, I think about that person in my mind, you know, especially it really hit me with the sexual assault episode. It was a really scary thing for me to edit, for me to post, but I thought about, who's going to listen to this? Like, is it going to benefit anyone? Is it going to help anyone feel less alone? And that's what motivated me to do that. And obviously that's like a larger scale example, but it can be winded down too. It's like, if we're talking about something that maybe just isn't covered very much, or an important perspective, you know, something around activism, I want people to hear that message, even if it's just 1 or 20, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's such a key point, and I fully resonate with that, of who is this impacting? And that is often what I think about in order to stay motivated on whatever it is that I'm working on, that maybe I get bored of it, or I get tired of it, or I don't feel inspired by it anymore. There's this series that we've been working on called Mindfulness and Money, which is for our other company that we work with, which is Conscious Economics. So with those videos, we've been editing those videos for over a month now, every single day. So,
and they're like interview-ish
And they're
kind of
interviews. They're like
videos.
conversations.
Yeah.
It's like editing like 20 of these podcasts.
A lot of them are about finance.
And a lot of them are about finance. So when it comes to finance, a lot of the jargon and a lot of like the terminology can be a lot. And because it can be a lot, it can also sometimes get boring, especially when you've listened to it 20 times over and over every day in a row. So when it comes to videos like that, and I start to feel sort of demotivated to make it look the best that it can, or uninspired to add that extra element to really make it come alive. Whenever I start feeling that, I really start thinking about who is this going to impact. There was this festival that we went to not too long ago called Mixtio. And in that festival, there was this band. I don't recall the name of the band, unfortunately, but the band had this girl that was rapping on top of the band. So it was beautiful. They had like a sax player, keys, guitar, drums. Each person had a solo. It was beautiful. And the poetry was extremely beautiful as well. But what I noticed in the poetry itself is that she was talking a lot about being broke. She was talking about not having the money, about having to get loans, about being in student loan debt, about having to borrow money from somebody that she knows and then not being able to pay it back. And the ironic thing was that with people like that, and certainly the community that I grew up around, it was very much people that were in not very good financial situations, still going out and, for example, getting like the latest Yeezy shoes, you know, or like the latest Air Jordans, but being broke and having those things. So there is this culture that perpetuates that and that people get sucked into, and you're stuck in this loop of being broke but having the latest things. So when I saw her, it reminded me of me. And when I thought about that, I was like, wow, she needs some mindfulness and money.
Like, that's who I'm doing this video for.
This is who I'm doing this for. Like, this is like, I try to remember, like, it now that I know these things that are being taught in these modules, there's so many people that don't know it.
And need to know it.
So that's what I try to think about whenever I'm editing something that, quite honestly, I'm bored of.
Yeah. And that's the really beautiful thing about art in so many different forms, is it is a medium for sending messages. You know,
absolutely.
It's a medium for activism.
Yeah.
And I feel really, really strongly about video being that, because it is such a good way to make something very digestible and understandable. You know, I love watching YouTube videos where they're able to break something down to you, where you've maybe been in school and tried to learn it from someone and they make you feel stupid. You know, I love that.
I hate that. I hate when people break it down, air quotes around that, and don't at all. And it's actually, you leave more confused. So I think that when it comes to any art that you're working on, especially if it has a message behind it, you really need to start thinking about what it means to you, first of all, and why you even started the project, but also who you're going to be impacting. Even if it's one person, in my opinion, it's worth it.
Yeah. And before you're making it, like, say before you film this video, before you create this art piece, or before you start coming up with your social media strategy to promote it, think about those questions and meditate on it or journal about it. Like, really get clear on those things, because that is what's going to help you stay motivated. That is honestly what has really, really helped me.
Absolutely. And I think that you bring up a good point that has another message behind it, which is that art, even though it is made by us, it's not just for us. You know, 99.99% of the time, you know, your art is not just about you. It's bigger than you. Majority of the time, your art is bigger than you, and the people that it reaches, the people that connect to it, the people that it impacts, that's what it's all about. That's what true art is to me. So, you know, art, I do see it as a way to express myself. But the beautiful thing is that however it is that I express myself, my thoughts, my feelings, or an idea, people resonate with that.
Yeah.
You know, and that's so beautiful, because art is connecting us to other human beings. So when we put art out into the world, we need to be thinking about that.
Yeah, you like your purpose doesn't have to be the same as our purpose, but you should find one is really what the message of this is.
Yeah, and on your point about not having to choose our cause, but just choosing one, I think of the video that we did back in the day, the masterclass video with Dexter of how to become a drag queen. You can check it out on our YouTube channel. But that video, I remember at the end, she says, there are many causes to fight. You don't have to pick mine, but you have to pick one. It's our responsibility.
Yes.
And I really do believe that. I believe that it is an artist's responsibility to pick a cause and have that resonate and show in their art form. Yeah. And it doesn't have to be in every single piece, but there's always, always, always an underlying message and an underlying theme that comes with every single piece that you put out there.
Yeah. 1000%. And just knowing that you stand for that thing is inherently important.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Sort of on the note of talking about tying activism into your work, I think another thing to bring up that's really important here is that part of dedicating yourself to a cause is also taking care of yourself. Right?
Oh, oof.
You know what
that
I mean?
is something that we forget to do all the time. Especially as artists, you like give
and activists.
Give. And activists, yes, you give your energy, and then it's like, well, you're taking care of people, you're giving them your energy. It's like, who's giving you energy? Exactly. And who's taking care of you?
Exactly. So if you're spreading yourself so thin by constantly giving and giving, then at a certain point you'll either, one, have no more to give,
fair and
or
square,
two, your capacity to give will eventually stay stagnant. Does that make sense? Like like I remember meeting this woman from the Encampment Support Network, and she does such incredible work like every single day, but I can tell she's absolutely exhausted, and potentially that means that they haven't been able to build the organizational structure they need to take on volunteers, you know what I mean, of different capacities to build their message and to create strong policy change that isn't them. Because she told us, she's like, I feel like I'm constantly just putting out fires, you know? And when you're constantly just putting out fires,
that's exhausting.
Exactly.
That's so exhausting to just like be constantly putting out fires. That leaves no time left for you. And if you're only putting out fires, how are you supposed to build any sort of structure or foundation or network or anything?
Her organization is so integral to so many people living in encampments.
Absolutely.
But you also need that next level. Yeah. You know what I mean? To make that actual systemic change.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. And especially when it comes to like such an important cause, like that is such an important cause in Toronto. The homelessness population is insane and not at all being dealt with in the proper ways. So we need people like her. Yeah. But if people like her are just constantly putting out fires, then how is anything supposed to build? Yeah. You know. So how would you even suggest that people take care of themselves first?
Quick plug though, I would like to say if you're interested in the Encampment Support Network or in the topic of what's going on with the homelessness crisis, particularly in Toronto, we did do a very informative episode on that, which I'll like plug here around the video. And I'll put it in the show notes too for our listeners who are not watching. So what was your question? Ask me again. I'm ready.
How would you suggest or even begin to suggest that people start taking care of themselves?
Play.
I love playing. Okay, what do you mean by play? Because I feel like it's a term that needs to be very well known but isn't yet. Yeah. So let's bring a little bit more light into that term. What is playing?
That's a hard question.
That is a hard question, but do you know why I ask it?
Why?
Is because along the way, as you're growing up, as you're becoming an adult,
we forget to play.
We forget to play. Hey! No, but for real, we do forget to play. And playing is like, okay, it's interesting because as an adult, if you tell an adult to play, they're going to be like, what do I do?
I have no idea.
Where do I put my hands?
Yeah.
What does my body do now? But if you tell a kid to play, they know exactly what to do.
Yeah.
They're like, okay, bing, And then they like make up something. They'll like make up a thing with a stick even. Like they don't need any tools. They just do it.
Yeah.
And we know how to do it inherently. We know how to do it. But as we become adults, we forget how to. And this is actually, I want to bring up like a quick thing that is scientific, which is that there's certain neural connections in our brain that as a kid we use a lot. But and it's been shown and proven in studies that as we grow older, those functions and those connections start to lose grip, if you will. And other connections, I'll call it the adult connections, which is like get to work on time and stress about this and like pay your bill and this and that. Those start to take over. And because that's prominent in your head, you lose the neural connection in your brain that you had as a kid. So it actually is like a not a chemical thing, but like a neural thing in your brain. I'm not a scientist.
You scientifically forget how to play.
It's true though. You scientifically forget how to play.
That's just science,
It's
love.
absolutely important to remember. And as an adult, I can say that it is very difficult to remember because there's all of the prominent things like stress, anxiety, but tomorrow I have to wake up at 8, but like, I don't want to do this because like, what if it turns out like that? Or I don't want to get in the water. What if it's cold?
Yeah.
And
I don't want to get wet. I don't want to mess up my hair.
Yeah. Like,
screw it.
I want to challenge you.
Screw your hair.
I want to challenge you. Screw your hair. Seriously, what would happen if you just let it go and you said yes? What would happen? Like, what's actually think about this. As an example, Emily and I and all of our roommates went to Toronto Island to the beach. And it was still spring. So it was pretty brisky, y'all. So the water's cold and it's Lake Ontario. The water's cold all the time, but it was extra cold because it was spring. And suddenly Emily got this urge, I don't know, to play. And she was like, let's jump in the water. It'll be fun. And initially, my adult brain was like, don't do that. It's cold. You're going to get wet. How are you going to dry yourself? Your hair's going to be wet. And like, what if it's no fun? And I had to actively, on the spot, battle with my adult brain, like my child brain battling with my adult brain. And I had to ask myself, like, in my head, just like, what would happen if you jump in? What's the worst that could happen? Maybe you'd be a little chilly for like a few minutes and then you'll get over it. That's what I determined was the worst that could happen. So I was like, you know what? Forget it. Let's do it. And then we jump in and it was so good. And I loved it. And it was a great experience. And I have that as a memory. And it was so refreshing and not at all what I thought it would be. So the challenge is to really like every time your adult brain is like, don't do that. Don't play. Challenge yourself and be like, well, what's the worst that could happen?
Yeah.
Truly, what's the worst? And why not? Why not just do it? Why not just like forget about like put your ego down for a second and just do the things that you would have no fear doing as a kid, Yeah. I think that really, really helps when it comes to just like letting go of stress, letting go of anxiety, letting go of fear and all these adult manipulative thoughts that completely take over your ability to enjoy yourself.
Go play grounders.
Yeah, go play freaking grounders at a park.
Yeah.
At night.
Yeah, so you're not bothering the children.
Because your children are there in the day, so maybe go after they're gone.
Yes.
Otherwise, you're like that adult dude that's like
creepy person.
Hey kid, you want to play? Don't do that.
Don't do that.
Maybe
I'm
don't
not
do
recommending that for sure. No, I totally agree with that. I think your ego is the biggest detriment to your joy.
And your health, quite frankly.
Yeah. Who cares?
Yeah.
No one cares about you. Just have fun.
In a good way, though.
Yes.
Like, people care about you and stuff. But, like, in a good way. Nobody cares in a good way. Like, if you look silly, literally nobody cares.
I'll like you more.
Yeah, truly. Like, anytime that I think about, like, oh, my God, people are staring or something like that, I'm like...
Good.
Literally, I am a like they'll forget me in about 10 seconds and it literally doesn't matter at all.
And guess what? I had fun and I'm happy.
Exactly. It's like what people think or happiness.
Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah. Honest to God, I find like recreation and play to be the best form of self-care for me, because before I used to think it was like me laying down and watching like a Netflix movie, but I find, especially with how much screen time I have now, that isn't what's relaxing me. It's not what's really bringing me joy. It's just kind of like numbing me into another fake universe, which is nice sometimes. I do like that, but you know.
No, it's true. Yeah. But even if you're not on your screen all of the time because you're video editors like us, even if you're not, like, you know, everybody has been zoomed out. Yeah. Everybody. There's that Zoom fatigue. So you don't want to be on your screen anyway. You want to be outside. You want to play. You want to take care of yourself. And that
trust me, you want to do that.
Trust me, I'm a guru. Buy my course. But, you know, and that can look in many different ways. You don't have to go play grounders or jump in freezing cold water, but do things that maybe you didn't think you would enjoy, and just give them a try and just see if you don't, fair and square. Yeah. But if you do, told you so.
Bow. But that's about it for today's episode. That's all I got to say.
That's all I got to say too. And if you have, comment down below what your favorite form of playing is. Cute. If you got one, would love to hear. I would love to hear suggestions. I'm always open to those.
And let me know if you play. Yes, and let me know if you want to play grounders.
Yeah, let me know, because we will mess up a good game of grounders.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Well, with all of that being said, use guises. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening to this episode. We really appreciate your support. And if you do want to show your support, leave a like, subscribe, and comment in that little comment box below if you're on the YouTube channel. With all that being said, we'll see you in the next pod. Peace.